They vanished into Alaska's wilderness and were never seen again. There are certain places on Earth that just feel ancient. Places that are so vast and wild, they seem completely indifferent to us. Nowhere is that feeling stronger than in Alaska. It's America's last great wilderness, a place of stunning beauty and almost unimaginable danger. We're talking about towering, ice-crusted mountains, silent forests that stretch on forever, and a coastline that shatters into 1,000 frozen fjords. But this majestic landscape has a dark side. It holds a disturbing secret, a statistical anomaly that has stumped investigators for decades. Because in the vast and unforgiving Alaskan wilderness, people have a habit of disappearing. And we're not just talking about a few hikers getting lost. This is something else. For decades, stories have circulated about a loosely defined area that some have called the Alaska Triangle. Media reports claim that since the 1970s, a staggering 20,000 people have vanished here. While that number is hard to officially verify, the underlying fact is chillingly real. Alaska's statewide rate of missing persons is more than double the national average. Tonight, we're looking into the stories of the lost. The seasoned runner who vanished mid-race in front of thousands. The plane carrying one of America's most powerful politicians that flew into the clouds and was never seen again. These are the stories of those who stepped into America's last great wilderness and became its greatest mystery. The Alaska Triangle, a land of ill omen. To really get a grip on this mystery, you have to understand the sheer scale of the place. The Alaska Triangle isn't an official name you'll find on any map. It's a nickname born from tragedy, a way to try and make sense of an area with an unbelievable amount of loss. The 3 points of this so-called triangle are usually drawn between Anchorage, the state's biggest city, Juneau, the isolated capital in the southeast, and Utqiagvik, formerly Barrow, the northernmost city in the United States, sitting right on the Arctic coast. The numbers inside this massive area are just hard to process. Some reports claim that since 1988 alone, over 16,000 people have been reported missing across the state. In a single year, like 2007, Alaska had over 2,800 missing person reports. Now, it's important to know that the vast majority of these people are found, but many are not. In a state with such a small population, this works out to a rate of about 4 out of every 1,000 residents going missing each year, which is just staggering. And these aren't just stats on a page. They are hikers, tourists, pilots, fishermen, and locals. Some were experienced outdoorsmen, others were unsuspecting visitors. And in far, far too many cases, they are just gone. Now, you have to consider the logical explanations first. Alaska is a land of extremes. The terrain itself is an enemy. You have jagged mountains clawed with hidden crevasses that can swallow a person whole, and dense, unending forests that can disorient anyone. The weather is a violent and fickle beast. A sunny day can turn into a sub-zero blizzard in minutes. And then there are the predators. Alaska is home to some of North America's largest, including grizzly bears, and they are a very real threat. Trying to find someone in this environment is a logistical nightmare. A search area that would be huge in any other state is just a tiny speck in Alaska. A downed plane can be buried by an avalanche in hours. A lost hiker can be erased by a sudden snowstorm. So, often, the official conclusion is that the wilderness just claimed another victim, a tragic, but explainable, accident. But that explanation doesn't sit right with everyone. It doesn't quite account for the sheer number of cases or the bizarre details that surround so many of them. Why do entire planes seem to fall out of the sky without a single distress call? Why are personal belongings sometimes found neatly stacked, as if the owner just evaporated? It's in these unanswered questions that darker theories start to creep in. Some talk about powerful energy vortexes that mess with compasses and electronics. The area is a known hotspot for UFO sightings, which leads to speculation about alien involvement. And woven into the land itself are the ancient legends of Alaska's indigenous peoples, stories of spiritual gateways and shape-shifting creatures, passed down long before settlers ever arrived. These stories warn of dangers not of this world, forces waiting in the silent woods and icy peaks. It's this clash of harsh reality and unsettling folklore that makes the Alaska Triangle one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. The Vanished Statesman. On October 16, 1972, the legend of the Alaska Triangle went mainstream with a disappearance so high-profile it kicked off one of the biggest search and rescue operations in American history. The man who vanished wasn't some random tourist. He was Thomas Hale Boggs Sr., the powerful House Majority Leader from Louisiana, one of the most influential men in Washington, D.C. Boggs was in Alaska campaigning for a first-term congressman named Nick Begich. That Monday, Boggs, Begich, an aide named Russell Brown, and their pilot, Don Johns, boarded a twin-engine Cessna 310 in Anchorage. They were headed to Juneau for a fundraiser. For an experienced pilot like Johns, it should have been a routine flight. But the plane never got there. When the Cessna didn't land, the alarm went out. At first, everyone hoped they'd just been forced to land at a remote airstrip because of bad weather. But as hours turned into days, that hope faded. The disappearance of a sitting House Majority Leader was unprecedented, and the response was enormous. The search was a military-scale operation, involving 40 military aircraft and 50 civilian planes. They combed a 325,000 square mile grid, an area bigger than Texas. For 39 agonizing days, the nation held its breath. They found nothing. Not one piece of the plane. Not a scrap of metal. Not an oil slick. Nothing. The Cessna 310 and the 4 men on board had vanished as if they had never existed. The total lack of evidence was stunning. Investigators later found out that the plane's emergency locator beacon wasn't even on board. It was found later in another plane in Fairbanks. This one mistake meant that if the plane did go down, it sent out no final cry for help into that vast, empty wilderness. With no facts, conspiracy theories started to spread. The biggest one centered on Hale Boggs's role on the Warren Commission, which investigated the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Boggs had publicly said he had strong doubts about the official finding of a single bullet and a lone gunman. So, was the crash really an accident? Could powerful forces have arranged a sophisticated assassination, disguised as a tragic disappearance? It's a theory without proof, but it adds a sinister layer to the mystery. More recently, the podcast Missing in Alaska has presented evidence that challenges the old story that the plane simply iced up and crashed. They revealed the Cessna actually had de-icing and anti-icing systems, which should have given the pilot time to radio for help. Witness accounts even suggest the plane might have been heard flying over the town of Whittier, meaning it had already made it through the dangerous Portage Pass. This would narrow the crash site to a more specific 75-mile stretch, an area that could potentially be searched today with modern sonar. Hale Boggs's family has called for a new search, especially since melting glaciers are now revealing wreckage from other planes that crashed decades ago. But for now, the fate of the Cessna and its 4 passengers remains one of the Triangle's deepest secrets, a chilling reminder that in this wilderness, even the powerful can be swallowed whole. The runner who disappeared mid-race. Some disappearances are scary because they happen in total isolation. But others are scary for the exact opposite reason. They happen in plain sight, surrounded by people, where you'd think it's impossible for someone to just vanish. That's the story of Michael LeMaitre, a 66-year-old man from Anchorage whose disappearance is one of the most baffling in the entire Alaska Triangle. His story unfolds at the Mount Marathon Race, an infamous event held every 4th of July in Seward. This isn't a fun run. It's brutal. The course is only about 3 miles, but it's almost straight up a 3,000-foot mountain and back down. We're talking loose shale, slick mud, and jagged rocks. It's a race that attracts the toughest people on the planet, where injuries are expected. But in its nearly 100-year history before 2012, no one had ever died during the race. On July 4th, 2012, Michael LeMaitre was at the starting line. He was 66 and an avid runner, but this was his first time trying Mount Marathon. By all accounts, he wasn't ready for how vicious this particular course was. To make matters worse, the weather was awful, cold, rainy, and foggy, cloaking the top of the mountain in a thick mist. Michael started his climb, much slower than the other runners, but he was determined. Near the summit, he was last seen by a race official who was on his way down. The official told him where the turnaround point was. Michael was clearly struggling, but he kept going. He was just 200 feet from the summit, the last official racer on the mountain. And then he was gone. He never checked in at the summit. He never started his descent. He never crossed the finish line. Surrounded by thousands of spectators below, on a mountain with hundreds of other people, Michael LeMaitre had vanished. The search started almost immediately. It was intense. Search teams, helicopters, and volunteers swarmed the mountain for days, focusing on his last known location. They searched every rock chute and every patch of dense brush. They found nothing. No sign of a fall. No piece of his clothing. Not a single clue. It was as if the mountain had just opened up and swallowed him. So how could this happen? The most accepted theory is that he got disoriented in the fog. Hypothermia might have set in, clouding his judgment. One plausible scenario is that when he got to the summit, he couldn't find the official timing mat because the officials had already packed it up and headed down. Confused, he might have wandered past the correct turnaround point, pushing deeper into the even more rugged terrain beyond the race course. From there, a fall or exposure would have been fatal. The community was heartbroken. The race implemented new safety rules, like cutoff times and sweepers, who follow the last runner to make sure everyone gets down safely. Michael LeMaitre was declared legally dead in August 2012. His body has never been found. His disappearance is a terrifying lesson that in Alaska, you don't have to be alone to get lost. Sometimes, the wilderness can reach out and take you, even in the middle of a crowd. These cases are just scratching the surface of a much bigger, more complicated mystery. What do you think happened to Michael LeMaitre on that foggy mountain? Was it just a tragic accident, or could something else be going on? Let me know your theories in the comments. Talking about these stories is how we keep the memories of the lost alive. The Nome Enigma, a town on the edge of nowhere. If the Alaska Triangle is the big picture, the small, isolated town of Nome is its chilling, concentrated epicenter. Located on the coast of the Bering Sea, Nome is a community on the edge of the world. No roads connect it to the rest of the state. You either fly in or, in the summer, come by boat. In winter, it's a world of darkness, ice, and brutal cold. It's a place where survival is a daily fight, and where a dark history of disappearances has fueled fear for decades. Between the 1960s and 2004, at least 24 people, mostly men and many of them Alaska natives, vanished in or around this tiny town of just a few thousand. The sheer number of cases for such a small population got national attention and started terrifying rumors of a serial killer. The mystery got so big it was turned into a Hollywood movie, the 2009 film The Fourth Kind. The movie, which was misleadingly marketed as a true story, ignored the serial killer theory and instead pushed a story about alien abduction. It was a huge hit, but it was also widely criticized for fabricating evidence and exploiting the real tragedies of the victims' families. All the public attention eventually prompted an FBI investigation. They reviewed the 24 cases, looking for a pattern, for some hint of a predator. Their conclusion was much more mundane, but in a way, even more tragic. The FBI found no evidence of a serial killer or aliens. Instead, they pointed to a deadly mix: excessive alcohol and the unforgiving Arctic environment. For a long time, Nome had looser alcohol laws than many of the surrounding dry villages. People visiting would sometimes drink heavily, get disoriented in a snowstorm, wander onto the treacherous sea ice, or just succumb to the cold, sometimes just yards from safety. The environment is a swift accomplice, erasing tracks with blowing snow. The FBI's findings were a dose of reality, but for the families of the missing, they offered no real closure. And unsolved cases continue to haunt the community. The unsolved case of Florence Okpealuk. The disappearances around Nome aren't just a thing of the past. They are a painful, present-day reality. Nothing makes this clearer than the case of Florence Flo Okpealuk, a 33-year-old mother who vanished in 2020, reigniting the community's worst fears. Florence was from the small village of Wales, but had moved to Nome in 2013. Everyone knew her as a kind person with a big smile. She worked at the local health corporation and was a devoted mother. On August 31, 2020, Florence was last seen at a camp on West Beach, just outside of town. Surveillance footage caught her walking, and then she was gone. When she was reported missing, her jacket, shoes, and socks were found near the tent where she was last seen. That discovery was an immediate red flag. No one would willingly leave behind essential gear like that in the Alaskan climate. The search was massive. Local police, state troopers, the FBI, and the Coast Guard all joined in. Community members organized huge search parties, combing the tundra and the coast. But the only trace of her ever found were those items on the beach. Florence's case is a heartbreaking example of the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, or MMIP, crisis. Across the country, and especially in Alaska, Native people, particularly women, go missing and are murdered at shockingly high rates compared to other demographics. These are not just statistics. They are people like Florence. The frustrating lack of answers in her case highlights the systemic issues that can often slow down these investigations. Investigators did find a vehicle that was in the area when Florence vanished, and they spoke to the driver, but no suspects have been named and no arrests have been made. The investigation is still open, but the leads are cold. Florence Okpealuk, a daughter, a mother, and a friend, is now another name on a list that is already far too long, and her face has become a symbol of the ongoing tragedy that haunts Indigenous Alaska. The whispers of the wilderness, Indigenous legends, and paranormal theories. When the official investigations hit a dead end and the logical answers just don't feel like enough, people naturally start looking for other explanations. In Alaska, this is amplified by the deep sense of mystery the land itself holds. The rational world of search grids and police reports starts to fade, and a more ancient, unsettling world of myth and high strangeness takes over. For centuries, the Tlingit people of southeast Alaska have told stories of the Kushtaka, which translates to land otter man. These are terrifying, shape-shifting creatures said to live in the wilderness. The legends say they lure people to their deaths by mimicking the cries of a baby or a woman in distress. A lost traveler follows the sound, thinking they're helping someone, only to be led into danger and torn apart by the Kushtaka. To a skeptic, it's a cautionary tale, a boogeyman invented to keep kids out of the dangerous woods. But to others, these legends are literal warnings. They look at cases where experienced woodsmen vanish from familiar trails, and they wonder if some dark intelligence was involved. Could a disoriented Michael LeMaitre, lost in the fog, have heard a sound that led him off that mountain path to his doom? Beyond folklore, the Alaska Triangle is a hotbed of paranormal theories, just like its cousin in Bermuda. Researchers have pointed to strange magnetic anomalies in the region, so-called energy vortexes, that could theoretically mess with navigation equipment. Pilots have reported compasses spinning wildly and electronics failing for no reason. Could something like that explain how Hale Boggs's plane just flew into a cloud and disappeared? Then you have the unusually high number of UFO sightings reported in the Triangle. Strange lights, impossible maneuvers. It's all led to the most sensational theory of all, alien abduction. While it's the easiest to dismiss, for some, it's the only thing that explains the sheer strangeness of some cases, the total lack of wreckage, the suddenness of the disappearances, the feeling that people aren't just lost, but taken. These theories about monsters, vortexes, and aliens are all born from our need to find a pattern in the chaos. While they aren't provable, they speak to the unsettling power of the Alaskan wilderness. It's a place so vast and so powerful, it can feel like the normal rules just don't apply. The stories we've looked at tonight are just a few threads from a much bigger web. For every famous case like Hale Boggs, there are thousands of others. They're the local hunters who never came home, the tourists whose rental cars were found empty on a lonely road, the families erased from existence. Media reports claim over 20,000 souls have been lost to this enigmatic land since the 70s. Many of those can be chalked up to the harsh environment, but many others defy any easy explanation, leaving behind a cold silence full of questions. They are proof that something is happening in Alaska, whether it's geological, meteorological, or something else entirely. The wilderness doesn't give up its secrets. For the thousands who have vanished, their stories are now part of the land itself, locked away in ice and silence. The question isn't just where they went, but what is it about this vast, beautiful, terrifying place that keeps taking them? The mysteries of the Alaska Triangle are far from solved. If you found these stories as compelling as I do, please like this video and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown. Most importantly, share your own thoughts and theories in the comments. Every conversation helps make sure that the people who vanished are never forgotten.